Ai hoi anō tātou. Tūtahi nā mihi ki nā rangatira o mua. So huge greetings to those you, and I've heard all your names, rangatira from long ago. Ki nā rangatira o Nāianei, and we have all those who are here from now. Atu noa te kui taku whānau tēnei. So I had the privilege of spending quite a bit of time with the diplomatic corps, and to my family over here, I would just say to you all, a tēnā koutou anō. So kia ora. Especially, of course, to my very good friend here, the Dean of the Corps. Kia koe e te kai hau tū e te rangatira, tēnei te mihi noa te kia koe. Me tō rōpui tai atina nā mai. Hoi anō tātou, e rara we te tūni o tēnei o tātou whare. Hei mihi anō ake ki tēnei o tātou. So a mihi also to this room. You know, when we're looking at a place to host this, there were many, many options. And I just want to turn to my mate David Payton down there and say thank you to you and the team for bringing it here. And what do you reckon? I have with me today someone, he was described to me as, this fellow knew where we were going before we got there. This fellow probably wrote the policy, and this fellow also owned the hotel. Hello, Kirikiri, please put your hands together. Sitting next to Ro, of course, I have, she was Her Excellency from Vanuatu, Georgina Roberts, and someone who has guided a lot of the Maori aspects of the things that we've been doing of late. Taku tuahina tēnei, Georgina Roberts. When I was in London about a week and a half ago, I was accosted by Ngāti Rānana, who basically said to me, when do you bring your hone back? I said, hone who? Knowing, of course, hone, they still talk about you over there. Hone Riley, please. I want to tell you a very quick story. My son came home with a friend of his one day, and his friend said, where does your father work? And my son said, oh, he works at MFAT. I said, MFAT? What's that? Oh, you know, it's a ministry. Ah, you mean they've got a ministry for fat people? No doubt he was barred from a home for the rest of his life. What it actually points to, though, is a rather simple message. And with the greatest respect, when I first was asked to come to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, I had no idea what that was. I had no idea what that was. I didn't know how important that was, because the spaces that I roamed in were rather about Māori development, Māori education, in trying to seek the pinnacle of one's endeavour for Māori. And with the greatest respect to my tuahine who was talking about Asia being really important, I need to say to you, Asia is only as important as Māori. Hoi anō, ngā mi kawe. So the thing about this is that I was the director at the Ministry of Culture and Heritage when Helen Clark was there. And I had 3 people come to see me because at that time the government was looking at Māori engagement and how we developed that. Those people were a very good friend of mine and yours, the late Tia Barrett. Another good friend of mine and yours, she's a career diplomat, now retired, Deborah Pankhurst. But the fellow who really pushed me to do the drive for Māori within this ministry was our very good friend, Alan Williams. Now, I have to tell you, they came with a floor plan. They came with a strategy. They came with a policy direction. And I asked them to put it in the bin and pull mine out and said, let's do this. To which Alan Williams said to me, why don't you come and work for us? The rest is history. My inclusion in foreign policy has been tempered in a sense by the fact that, for me, when I first arrived, Māori was like running shoes, you know? Not too bad when you want to run over stones, but not very good or required when you're around the boardroom. And I needed to change that. I needed to change that because Māori were going in certain directions and we were going there fast. And I needed to change that because, and I want to mention 3 other people, please, in this room. One is my former CE, Simon Murdoch, who basically opened the eyes and looked at what was possible and said, can you help us to do this? That is, grow the Māori peace. The second one was someone who came in rigorous, robust, Māori speaking, and a very good friend, and I'm pleased he's in the room, John Allen. Tēnā koe, John. Tēnā koe mō au nā mahi, me tō kōrero. So for your work, but also your language, you came with language and you opened people's eyes. And the third one, of course, is my present CE, Brooke Barrington, who has decided to take policy and engender it into Māori development. And my only plea, Brooke, is that before you head upstairs, that you embed that so that when your next person comes along, will help us all to drive it. Hoeno, nā mi kia koe. So that largely, Māori, we have a lot of stories and we could tell you them all night, but rather I'd like to hear from these 3 and I'm sure you would as well. What I've asked them to do is this. I've asked them if they could please give us a highlight and give us a challenge in any way, shape or form. Rau Kirikiri.
Kia ora tātou. When I was bludgeoned by John McKinnon and others to appear here today, I wondered what it was I was going to talk about. I mean, I left the ministry back in 1998. It's kind of a long time ago. It was before the trade bit was on the end of the name. At the time it was MFA. And I decided I would use a theme. There was a ditty on TV way back in the 70s, I think it was. It ran, don't leave the country, don't leave town until you've seen the country. And my variation on that is, don't leave town until you know the country. Okay? Now, having said that, not unlike Martin's experience, when I joined Foreign Affairs, I knew nothing about it. But a man who was to become a mentor and a very good friend of mine, David McDowell, sitting at the back of the room, mentioned to me in a meeting I had with him in Auckland at the time that there was this thing called Foreign Affairs, which I had no idea about. And after a bit of a discussion, he sort of said to me, you might be interested in joining and being a part of this caravan. I said, yeah, okay, and completely forgot about it. A month or so later, I got a letter from a guy by the name of Doug Law saying, following on from your conversation with David McDowell, we are expecting your application. I had no intention of putting an application in at the time, but I did. And the rest, as they say, is history. But I want to relate one small story about when I came for the interview, because this relates to this don't leave town until you know the country thing. I was sitting outside the interview room, brand new suit. I think I was wearing a tie for the first time because before that I'd been a mere student at university. And there was this other guy in there who looked equally uncomfortable in his new suit as I was. A fellow by the name of Murray Thornley. We introduced ourselves to each other. Then I asked him, where are you from? He said, Amberley. To which I replied, where the hell's that? And then when he asked me where I was from, and I said, Te Kaha, guess what he said? Where the hell's that? So that's the point of my saying, don't leave town until you know the country. Because when you do, you need to know the country for the various things that you are confronted with when you do serve overseas. So that's the first part of my commentary. That's almost from the outside looking in. Now I want to talk about from the inside looking out, and then thirdly, I want to go back to from the outside looking back in again. And bear with me. Once I got into foreign affairs, again, not knowing exactly what sort of animal this was, I was left wondering, what am I here for? What am I doing? Looked around, there weren't too many other Maoris. In fact, at the time, there was only one other, Tia Barrett. And then later on, Witihi Maida joined the group. So there was a very small band of Maori at the time. And my research at the time also told me that prior to that, there'd been the occasional Maori representative. Sir John Grace was the first New Zealand High Commissioner Fiji, for example. And there were, Karo Puketapu was in the High Commission in London, but there were few and far between. They came in spurts, one at a time. When I joined, the numbers were starting to build up. I mean, there were 3 of us, for God's sake. And then a 4th one joined, and a 5th one, and a 6th one. Atareta Puananga joined, Hekia Parata joined. So the numbers started to grow. And in that was a comfort factor that I think a lot of Maoris crave for when they enter something they know little about and often end up feeling very uncomfortable in. So that's point number 2. Number 1, from looking from within the organisation, looking out. Then there was a challenge of ensuring that, or looking to enable the ministry itself to be more reflective of Aotearoa, not just New Zealand. And in those early days, it was a huge challenge. Nowadays, I'm happy to say the challenge is not nearly as great. I mean, I'm sitting here all morning listening to everybody standing up and saying kia ora or tēnā koe first, almost before they say hello. And that's generally true of the whole of New Zealand society at the moment. We've come a long, long way. One of the challenges is we've still got a long way to go, an awful long way. But that, we have to take comfort in the fact that if I think back to the early 70s when I joined, I don't think I heard any person in foreign affairs say anything remotely like kia ora or tēnā koe. Even the telephone people never did. And now it's become more common and normal for that sort of thing to do, to happen. And that again is part of my thing about knowing the country before you leave town. Because it does address quite a number of the things I've heard here today about being New Zealand. How do people perceive us? Do they see us as an offshoot of Whitechapel or wherever? So that is a challenge. It remains a challenge. Even though I'm saying that we have come a long way and things have turned a corner, but believe you me, there's still a long way to go. An awful long way to go. Numbers in themselves don't answer the question. You can have as many Māori as you want in foreign affairs, but until it actually is truly reflective of a multicultural, bicultural Aotearoa or country, I think people will still be kind of mystified about New Zealand. Because that was one of my experiences when I joined Foreign Affairs and was posted abroad. I was a kind of mystery. I remember when I first went to the States and people asked me where I was from. I'd say New Zealand, and then they'd say to me, well, where did you come from before that? Because that was the perception. And as you know, perception is as much as like 9/10 of the truth. So there are these perceptions that, I lived through in my time in foreign affairs, And I suspect they're probably still around to a certain degree or other. So that's another challenge. You know, do we take a step up in where from where we are at the moment? And I don't think it's that hard, because we as a country, I should say, we've taken 2 or 3 steps already in the past 10 or 15 years. So another couple of steps, it's not that difficult. It's a challenge, all right? So that's that. Now, my third bit about looking back in again is to raise the issue around, so where are Maori today in New Zealand? And what does that mean for you? Now, there's been a lot of talk today about trade, right? Now, if you look around, Maori have become leaders in that part of our makeup through a number of different ways. The treaty claims process has facilitated that. There's a growing awareness and ability within Maoridom itself to engage in trade in a way we never did in the past, even although my old people used to say we were traders originally with Australia back in the day. But today, that level of expertise in the trading arena is quite sophisticated. In fact, it's hugely sophisticated. And I know MFAT today is working with a lot of organised Maori organisations, you know, the tohu wines of this world, there's a whole bunch of them. That effort is already being very diligently undertaken and seen through. But again, there's the challenge, not only about where Māori are on the trade spectrum, but also about getting more Māori into the organisation. How does MFAT make itself better known and more widely known amongst not just communities like the Māori community, but there's a number of other communities within New Zealand who to date probably haven't had as much exposure to foreign affairs as maybe some others. So those are that's my challenge. A highlight, I don't know, I had too many. I had many highlights. But when I look around this room, I haven't seen a lot of these people for years and years and years. Somebody said, we last saw each other 40 years ago. The truth was, it was probably 50. But a highlight, I suppose, is the friends you make working in organisations like Foreign Affairs. And there's a challenge in that as well, because if you know the nature of foreign affairs, you know it, that you're only home for a certain amount of time, and people that you might be close to or you know are actually abroad. You don't actually see them. So when your turn comes to go, they're back in New Zealand. So when you catch up, when you have an opportunity to catch up, it's really, really quite special. And that is for me. And so that's my highlight, is working with, knowing people and keeping in contact with them through whatever means. So, yeah, I think I've done my dash, but kia ora tātou.
Ngā mihi awa. So she was actually our deputy in Pretoria. She was also acting in Pretoria. And then she went to Vanuatu. How do I know that? Because I remember thinking, my God, is she jinxed? Because when she got there, there was a huge cyclone. Georgina Roberts.
E ngā mana engari o ngā kārangatanga maha tēnā koutou, tihei Maori ora. E tu anō au hei tētahi puti no Ngāti Praumata ko Ngaitirangi Ngāti Kauri me te whānau arua taupare. I'd like to point out that a significant proportion of the esteemed predecessors on whose shoulders we stand have come from Ngāti Pro. And I would also like to acknowledge...
Is it a highlight or a challenge?
Definite highlight. If our Secretary of Foreign Affairs can do a shout out to Ruatoria, no ruatoria ho, proud ruatoria girl, but also extremely proud to be here today. I stand here today representing a cadre of esteemed colleagues, many of whom are around the world doing the good work that we all know is underway as kaimahi no te manatu aorere. I have always felt it to be a great honour, privilege and a pleasure to work for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And I have several people to thank for that, and I want to acknowledge them because there are a number in this room. Rosemary Banks is one. Rosemary, alongside Bronwyn Chang and a few others in HR at that time, decided that they saw something in me in a different skill set. And I've been so proud and privileged to bring that skill set into this ministry and also advocate and promote for that skill set to be recognised in others. It's not so easy to feel confident when you see the huge amount of intellect and knowledge and expertise and experience that surrounds you when you join a ministry like this. But actually it's that intellect and experience that welcomes you in and makes you part of a whānau. My first boss in the ministry is here today, the esteemed John Hayes, who took me under his wing, and as we saw this morning, that's a pretty big wing, to show that an experience in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is never exactly the same for everybody. You bring a skill set of your own, but you have the privilege of putting that into effect alongside such a great set of colleagues and people, those who are from New Zealand, but also those offshore that we work with alongside and become the history and the institutional knowledge of our posts around the world as we move on, but they continue the good work. My experience as a Maori woman in the ministry and also the privilege of being a Maori woman head of mission is one that I had to explain to my whānau. For about 5 years, my father thought I worked at Internal Affairs and would say whenever he was asked, "Oh, what does George do?" "Oh, she does those passports and immigration things." Until he suddenly realised that when I started talking about, I had been going to meetings and sharing things that involved going overseas, he started to realise that that was something a bit different. So as Rose says, explaining what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade does is still a challenge. And it's a challenge that we must continue to promote beyond the universities, into secondary schools, into kura kaupapa, and even below that, into wānanga at the top level, kura kaupapa. Even now I've got my young nieces and nephews who are asking me, well, what does that mean? It's not just about working in Wellington, it involves representing our country. And that's the great privilege and honour we have, to represent our country. I go out and I represent my hapu, my iwi, my whānau in particular, whenever we are out on the world stage, or any stage, such as this esteemed one today. I wanted to quickly reflect on highlight and challenge. Actually, Martin's already explained my highlight. And I'm very pleased to have here today His Excellency, the High Commissioner of Vanuatu, a dear colleague, because my highlight was one of the worst experiences I've had as in a professional respect as being in Vanuatu during Cyclone Pam, but it also has been the most rewarding on a personal and professional front. Bringing your Maori connections, our ability to build whanaungatanga, to identify the cultural awareness and competencies that are necessary when we're out representing our country, to stand up and sing waiata, to do karakia, to teach local staff actually who taught us that there is connection in that cultural framework that we have, being Maori, being of the Pacific and being in our region, was so moving and special at that particular time. The challenge for me is the anxiety about who's coming behind. It's that context of titiro whakamuri, kōkiri whakamua, look behind to build the path ahead. I'm happy to pull back the branches to create the space for others to come forward, but we have to have those coming from behind to pick up the toko, to carry it on, to continue the good work that everyone has been doing, bringing those Māori kaupapa, mātauranga Māori, tikanga, kawa, all of those cultural references that thankfully now are a lot more familiar to us and have given me opportunities to do things like tutor Prince Charles and how to kōrero te reo, or welcome the King of the Bafokeng in South Africa to New Zealand, or even just kōrero in Bishlama with a few sprinklings of Maori and represent our country. Being Maori is a proud and privileged identity that I hold, but it's just me. What I hope is that there are others that we can bring into our ministry to do that as well, because it reflects the depth of our thread and the value that we have and the connections to our Pasifika whanaunga that we must continue to deliver. Thank you.
He's not only not bad at English, he's pretty good at Maori as well. But what you don't know, he's also fluent in Korean. Hone, harame.
Annyeonghaseyo. That's not the right one. I want to tautoko the mihi that have already been said today, to acknowledge the mana whenua of this region, Te Atiawa, Ngāti Toa Rangatira, Ngāti Raukawa ki te tonga. He paku mihi hoki ki tō tātou matua nei, e hāpai nei ngā mahi a kui a koro mā ki a koe mātene ko koe tērā i ngā wā katoa e kaha nei ki te tautoko i ngā mahi o ngai Maori, i ngā mahi o te krauna hoki no reira tēnā koe, tēnā tātou. As long as I've been working in the ministry, we have wanted to lift knowledge of things Māori within our existing staff, and we've also wanted to recruit more staff with knowledge of things Māori. And that often is Māori staff. And we've tried hard. It's always been a challenge. And we're still trying. Tēnā koe, Brooke. I think Brooke acknowledged that in his kōrero this morning. And it's interesting because I can see the people, even now in the ministry, who are screaming out for it. Give us more tikanga. Give us more knowledge. We'll run with it. In Aotearoa, my whanaunga Māori, my Māori relatives, have not always made this easy, depending on what context we're in. Sometimes it's very much, this is for us. But I have seen socially and politically in Aotearoa, in my time, last 20 years in the ministry, I've seen that change. And I see now more and more Māori who are feeling comfortable in their tikanga and who are wanting to share that more and empower others to make use of that and to acknowledge that. Because people bring mana to our tikanga Māori when they feel empowered to say Māori words and act in a way which brings mana to te ao Māori. So thank you to all of you here who no doubt are on your own journey. So knowledge of things Māori, we call it mātauranga Māori, and I believe everybody in New Zealand is on a mātauranga Māori journey. And some of you, he iti noiho, just a little bit, and others, you're swinging for the fences, and we're all on different journeys. But I know that myself and my colleagues here are all very keen to encourage you, take a risk. It's possible you could get it wrong, but it'll probably be all right. The things that I'm talking about is you're about to meet someone and you know you're pretty sure they're into their tikanga Māori. Because let's face it, Māori are diverse, very diverse. Some of us know our tikanga and our reo, others are at other different levels. Others we have whakapapa, but not so in touch with that side. But quite often you know when you're going to meet someone who's into that side of their Māoritanga. So I do encourage you to shake their hand, lean forward confidently. It's called a hongi. It'll be okay. And if they're not expecting it, it'll probably work itself out. We have a lot of people in this room, a lot of people in our building who, they go to Italy, they know whether it's 2 cheeks or 1. Some places you go, it's 3 cheeks. Kia mohi ai tātou katoa in Aotearoa, it's 1 cheek. And when I say there's lots of different mātauranga Māori journeys, there's also different ways of expressing mātauranga Māori. It could be something very, very simple, could be a wāta, could be knowing about different iwi. And in Aotearoa, in our kura, in our schools, and unfortunately, not everybody has had the opportunity to learn about Māoritanga to a great extent. And it's not our fault. It's not your fault. It's just a whittle. It's a challenge. So we just do our best, and we will tautoko you on that journey. So I've been asked to think of some highlights and some challenges. I think my highlights are also challenges, but some of the highlights at the moment, I want to acknowledge my colleague Shirley Munro-Holmes. In the whare in our building, every Wednesday, 12 o'clock, we have waiata class. Shirley and I run it. I want to remember one of my colleagues who's now left the ministry, Katie Paul, and I just remember, I remember Pātea Māori Club coming to Seoul in 2003, and what a do we turned on. And also Katie and I teaching some Korean bank workers some waiata for their Christmas class. So that's some, and of course my recent ambassador, Claire Fernie, for forcing us to dig up the garden of the Hyatt Regency in Seoul to do a hangi to celebrate the Korea-New Zealand FTA. New Zealand exports a lot of food, so it really is quite appropriate when you think about it. And in terms of the wero, the challenges, but these are also highlights. I want to recognise our colleague Ngāwini Keelan, who's not here today, Ngāwini and Jeremy Palmer, who, together with Vangelis Vitalis, have been working on our beautiful Māori engagement strategy, which we're rolling out at the moment in the ministry with the support of our SLT. And also something that Martin and I have been working on recently, which is re-establishing some internships that we have, which are focused on Māori staff, and really excited to see them come in, Martin, in about 2 weeks from now. And on that, I'd like to recognise my colleague Ricky Tuwini, Carissa Toilupe, Christina Edmonds, and Carolyn Schwager, who's been driving them all to get it done. Nō reira, he mihi tēnei kia koutou katoa, tēnā koutou, kia ora anō huhi mai no tātou katoa.
One of the challenges is trying to get all this knowledge into 35 minutes. But I just want to say to them all, we can name so many people, and so can you. I'd just like to take a moment, a couple of seconds, to remember those who are no longer with us, because in my culture and in your culture, we also recognise them because they've paved the way for us to be here today. So if we may just, for a moment. Kia ora tātou. And now, look, we don't have time for questions, but you can ask questions of these people when you finish. We have, in a sense, hit that particular wall. I do hope you do take the opportunity to speak to them. They have some amazing stories. If I can leave this with you. I think Rau Kirikiri wrote this. It was called Whaia te iti kahurangi. Ki te tuohu koe, me maunga teitei. Seek the pinnacle of whatever you are doing. So seek the pinnacle of your endeavour. But if you have to bow down, let it be to a lofty mountain. Tēnā koutou, me paki mai.